Everywhere you look right now, people are complaining about Canada. Housing is too expensive. Groceries cost more. Life feels harder than it used to. And to be fair, they're not wrong. Since around 2020-2023, housing prices in major cities like Toronto and Vancouver have surged to levels many people never expected. Rent has climbed. Interest rates increased sharply starting in 2022. And for many families, it feels like the dream is slipping away. So people talk, online, in the news, among friends. You hear things like, Canada isn't what it used to be. It's getting too hard to live here. There are better places now. And if you only listen to those voices, you start to believe one thing, that everything is going in the wrong direction. But here's the part almost no one is talking about. At the exact same time all of this is happening, Canada is still quietly doing something that many other countries are struggling to maintain. And most people don't even realize it, because when problems get louder, the good things become harder to see. Now stay with me for a moment, because this isn't about ignoring the problems. This is about seeing the full picture. And once you see it, it changes how you understand what's really happening here. In fact, some of the very things people are complaining about are connected to why Canada is still one of the most stable places in the world to build a life. Not perfect, but stable. And in uncertain times, that matters more than most people think. So as you're watching this, I want you to think about your own situation, where you live, what you've noticed, what's changed around you, and tell me, where are you watching from? Because what's happening in Canada right now isn't just a local story, it's part of something bigger. Now, to really understand what people are missing, we need to look at one of the biggest complaints first: housing. Because this is where most people stop their thinking and where the deeper story actually begins. Now let's talk about the one thing almost everyone brings up first: housing. Because if you ask people what's wrong right now in Canada, this is where the conversation usually starts and ends. Prices are high, affordability feels out of reach. And in cities like Toronto and Vancouver, that pressure has been building for years, especially after the surge between 2020 and early 2022, when low interest rates pushed demand to historic levels. Then came the shift. In 2022, interest rates began rising rapidly, one of the fastest increases in decades, and suddenly, everything changed. Monthly payments went up, borrowing became harder, buyers pulled back, and for many people, it felt like the door had completely closed. Now here's where most people stop the story. They look at those facts, and they conclude, this system is broken. But what if that's only part of the picture? Because while housing became more difficult in certain areas, something else started happening at the same time. Quietly, people began moving differently. Instead of focusing only on the biggest cities, they started looking outward, smaller cities, towns, regions that had been overlooked for years, places where housing was still possible, places where life moved at a different pace. And this isn't just theory. Between 2020 and 2023, Canada saw a noticeable shift in migration patterns, with more people moving to smaller urban areas and rural communities, partly driven by remote work and changing priorities. That's a real shift, not something you hear about every day, but something that's reshaping how people live. Now compare that to what's happening in places like the United States. Yes, there are affordable areas there too. But there's also something else, a much wider gap in stability. Healthcare access, social safety nets, consistency across regions, and this is where Canada quietly stands out. Because even with rising housing costs, the system itself is still structured to support long-term stability. It's not about being the cheapest, it's about being predictable. And that matters more than people think. Because when you're building a life, raising a family, planning for the future, uncertainty is often more expensive than price. Now this doesn't mean housing isn't a real challenge. It is. But what many people are missing is this. The story isn't just about prices going up, it's about how people are adapting. New strategies, different locations, changing expectations. And once you see that, you start to realize something important. This isn't the end of opportunity. It's a shift in where that opportunity exists. And that shift is opening doors in places most people aren't even looking yet. But housing is only one part of the story. Because even if you solve where to live, there's another question people are asking right now, and it's just as important. Can I actually afford to live day to day? Groceries, bills, basic life. And this is where the conversation becomes even more interesting, because what people are feeling and what's actually happening are not always the same thing. Now let's go deeper into something everyone feels every single week: groceries. Because this is where frustration becomes real. You walk into a store, pick up the same items you've always bought, and somehow the total is higher than you expected. Again. And this isn't just a feeling. Between 2021 and 2023, food prices in Canada rose significantly, driven by global supply chain disruptions, fuel costs, and inflation that affected almost every major economy. So when people say, everything is getting more expensive, they're right. But here's the part that often gets overlooked. This isn't just a Canada problem, it's global. In fact, countries across Europe and even the United States experienced similar, sometimes even sharper increases during that same period. Food costs went up, energy costs surged, supply chains broke down. So the question isn't just, why is it expensive here? The better question is, how is this country handling it compared to others? And this is where things get interesting. Because while prices have increased, Canada has still maintained something that many places struggle with: consistency, access, and a level of food safety and quality that remains among the highest globally. You still walk into a store and find stocked shelves, reliable supply, standards that don't fluctuate wildly from one region to another. Now that might not feel like a win when you're paying more, but in times of global disruption, it's more important than most people realize. Because in some parts of the world during those same years, it wasn't just about higher prices. It was about shortages, uncertainty, and not knowing if basic goods would even be available. Now here's the deeper truth. When systems are under pressure, the real test is not whether they feel perfect, it's whether they hold. And in many ways, Canada's system has held, not without strain, but without collapse. And that distinction matters, because when people say things are getting worse, what they're often reacting to is the cost. But what they're not always seeing is the stability behind that cost. And stability is what allows people to plan, to adapt, to move forward. Now think about that for a moment. If you know prices are rising, but the system remains predictable, you can adjust, you can budget, you can make decisions. But if everything is uncertain, even small problems become much bigger. And this is where Canada quietly stands apart. Not because it's immune to global pressure, but because it absorbs that pressure differently. And that difference is what many people are missing right now. But even beyond groceries, beyond daily costs, there's something even more important that rarely gets talked about in these conversations. Something that doesn't show up on a receipt, but shapes people's lives in a much deeper way. And once you see it, you start to understand why, despite all the complaints, so many people still choose to stay, or even come here. Now here's the part that doesn't get talked about enough. Because when people discuss a country, they usually focus on what they can measure: prices, jobs, housing. But there's something deeper that shapes everyday life. Something harder to quantify, but impossible to ignore once you feel it. Stability. Not just economic stability, but social stability. The kind that affects how safe you feel walking outside, how confident you are raising a family, how predictable life feels from one year to the next. And this is where Canada continues to stand out, quietly but consistently. For decades now, Canada has ranked among the safer countries in the world, with relatively low crime rates compared to many large developed nations. Its healthcare system, while not perfect, remains publicly accessible, meaning that for many families, a serious health issue doesn't automatically become a financial crisis. Its education system continues to rank strongly globally, especially in foundational areas like literacy and math. Now, none of this means there are no problems. There are. Wait times, costs, pressure on systems. But here's the key difference. These systems still exist. They still function. And for millions of people, they still provide a level of security that shapes long-term decisions. Because when you're thinking about starting a family, you're not just thinking about today. You're thinking about 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road. You're asking questions like, will my children be safe? Will they have access to good education? If something goes wrong, will we be okay? And those questions matter more than most headlines. Now here's where everything connects. Housing feels harder, groceries cost more, life has pressure. But underneath all of that, there is still a foundation, a structure that holds. And that's why, even now, Canada continues to attract people from around the world. In fact, immigration levels have remained high in recent years, with hundreds of thousands of new residents arriving annually, even during periods of economic uncertainty. Think about that. While many are questioning whether things are getting worse, others are still choosing this place as the best option for their future. That doesn't happen by accident. Now let's come back to the original idea. Everyone is complaining about Canada. And again, those complaints are not baseless. They reflect real pressure, real challenges. But they don't tell the whole story. Because when you step back and look at the bigger picture, you start to see something different. Not perfection, but resilience. Not ease, but opportunity. Just in different places, in different forms than before. And maybe that's what people are missing. Because the question isn't, is everything perfect? It's compared to what? And when you begin to compare, when you look at stability, safety, long-term structure, Canada still stands in a position that many countries are trying to reach. Quietly, without the noise. So the next time you hear someone say that everything here is falling apart, pause for a moment. Look deeper. Because sometimes what feels like decline is actually a shift. And those who understand that shift are the ones who find the opportunities others miss. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think Canada is still a good place to build a future? Or do you feel like things are moving in the wrong direction? Drop your thoughts below, because your perspective might help someone else see things differently. And if you want more breakdowns like this, the ones that go beyond the headlines, stay with me. There's a lot more happening beneath the surface than most people realize.